Hey, what's up, and welcome to this episode of Rainer on Leadership, ROL. For those who are cool and trendy, maybe texting it. My name is Josh.
My name is Sam, and I'm the R in the ROL.
I'm just the LOL.
Which
Hey,
you're the LOL. Am I the SOL?
we'll have to talk about that next episode.
Oh, yeah. The next time you and
Yeah,
I are together, that we will talk about that. So a little teaser there.
little teaser there. Hey, Sam, I was wondering, do you, as a baseball guy, are you into the Savannah Banana sort of craze? What's your feelings on that?
I love it. I think it's good for baseball. I've not been to a game. Would love to go. I really wanted to go to their big event in Tampa, which, they broke all the records there. So it would have been awesome to go. I was out of town that day. Otherwise, I would have been there. So I think the Savannah Bananas are the Harlem Globetrotters of baseball. I'm not the first to say that, but that's who they are. It's good for baseball. Major League Baseball, MLB, can learn a few things from them, and I say go for it, and I'd like to see more Savannah Bananas. They're not a sponsor of today's episode, but Savannah Bananas, if you want to, I will be glad to receive you as a sponsor.
That's funny. I was just curious about that. I just recently found out that Texas has a affiliate called the Texas Tailgaters, and I tried to see it, but they're sold out. But speaking of sponsors, let's talk about our actual sponsor.
Yeah, and we definitely have some good ones. We certainly want to thank Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. Not only are they known for being like the premier theological institution, which they are, they also have some great practical programs for you. That's what I'm trying to say. I was trying to use the alliteration. It didn't quite come out right. But hey, they have a new Doctor of Ministry program, and it is solid. So not only do you get what you would expect from the academic research side of things, you're also going to get what you need to strengthen both you and your church. So you've got problems, they got solutions. sbts.edu/solutions. This Doctor of Ministry program will help you in your church. Very practical, rooted in great theology, awesome academic foundation, but man, you get the help that you need for your church. So their Doctor of Ministry program at Southern Seminary, go to sbts.edu/solutions.
Yeah, very good. So we've got quite an episode to talk about here. At the time of this recording, we are in the week after Easter services, and my timeline, I'm sure like yours, is filled with pictures of different backdrops, photo backdrops from friends I have all over the country and different churches, but also just packed out sanctuary, some praise numbers. A local church here baptized like 4,000 people on Easter. So there's all that kind of stuff going on. But not everyone is leading a growing church. Is that right, Sam?
Most are not. If you look at the data. By the way, when you get that picture in your sanctuary that's really full that you're going to use for, that Easter picture that you can use online to show everyone how many people you really have, make sure you stand all the way in the corner, all the way in the back, and get the angle just right so that it looks really, really, really full.
There's a way to do it. There's a way to take those pictures.
Yes, there is. That's why I'm saying it. And I'm just calling myself out and anyone else that's ever done it, because guilty party right here.
Look, they're cool pictures. They're neat, and we're excited about it. We also have to kind of laugh at ourselves as the industry that is leading churches, because there is a bit of there's an excitement to it, and we could talk about that.
Don't take that picture July 4th week. Or Memorial Day.
Yeah, depending on
or
your
Father's
church.
Day, unfortunately.
I know, right? Or just any day it's raining or slightly cold, or those kind of things. So we're going to talk this episode about some of the reasons why you might not be leading a growing church. And the reason for this is, number one, to maybe relieve some of that pressure that you're feeling like you might be a failure. That's not necessarily the case. The other secondary motive would be, once we can identify some of these things, then you can make changes or steps to remedy them. So some of these things can be fixed or changed over time. And so it's just a matter of finding out what they are. So,
Yeah, there are pastors. I've talked to many of them through Church Answers that don't experience a whole lot of growth their entire quote unquote career, right? So let's digest this. In some cases, let's just throw this out there. In some cases, it's poor leadership or apathetic leadership or just pastors not doing what they should be doing. That happens. But there's more to the story. And so I want to talk about and talk to the pastors that are like, I am doing what I should be doing. And sometimes churches just don't grow numerically.
yeah.
So let's dive into that. The first thing is this. Some pastors are simply called to difficult churches, and your job is to stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
That was my calling at First Southern Baptist Church, Floyd's Knobs, Indiana. And you had to say it like that. That's what they expected. So, and they're actually doing really well. Shout out to all of my Hoosier friends. I love you. First Southern, as they were called to shorten the name, or Church in the Knobs is what I was aiming for in a name change. It didn't happen. But I was 26 years old, just married, turning 27, and gone through four splits before I got there. I had no idea what I was doing. I remember somebody asking me, like, what curriculum should we order for the next quarter? I had never done that before. I'm like, I don't know. Oh, you guys use curriculum for Sunday school. Might want to do that. So, I mean, it was a mess. It was they were great people. It worked out well. But my job there was simply to get them stabilized, stop the bleeding. We did grow a little bit, but nothing that would get the attention of anybody. But that was my job. And for a lot of pastors, that's your role. And that can take 5, 6, 7 years to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just if you have like longer time, we could talk about change dynamics and changing or leadership in change and change culture. Those things, when you talk about a church that is established, a church that is older, let's say the church is 50, 60 years old, they've got a lot of habits and systems and structure and culture that creates the results that they're getting. And so it's going to take somebody to come in and change that. And to change that, though, you have to use a lot of leadership capital, acumen, hopefully wisdom and grace and all those kind of things. And sometimes there's just, man, I don't know another way to say it, but just a sacrificial lamb. There is a person that comes in, takes all the heat, makes the changes, breaks up the ground, but then because you spent that sort of change, you're not going to be able to lead past it. It's going to be nearly impossible to lead past it. I don't think this is a great illustration, but you can kind of think of David and conquering and establishing a kingdom, but because there was blood on his hands, he couldn't build the temple. He needed to do what he did, and he was in a spot to do what he did, but he wasn't the one to do the next part. So the longer we can the more we can grasp that idea that we're all interim pastors, that this is not our church. It was here before us. It'll be here after us. You kind of see your role in different ways. I don't think that's anything to be upset about or disappointed in. It may be something you need to really analyze whether or not, if you're at a stage in life where you're looking for that church to come in and settle down, a church that needs just a massive amount of immediate change is maybe not the setting that you want to go to.
Yeah. The next one is more negative. Most of these are positive in the sense that, these are pastors, they're good pastors that know what they're doing. They just happen to be at a church where it's just not going to grow for whatever reason. But I do want to call out the pastor who doesn't do evangelism. So why is my church not growing? Well, it's like, are you sharing your faith? Are you inviting people to your church? When was the last time you won someone to Jesus? And I get that that's the work of the Holy Spirit, but if you've gone 5 or 7 years and you haven't won anybody to Christ, I think that's a problem. Like, I think that there's an issue there. So some pastors are not evangelistic, and if they're not evangelistic, their churches are not likely to be evangelistic, and therefore the culture of the church does not change. So I just want to mention that, that let's all self-reflect a little bit. It's like, man, my church isn't growing, and I think I'm doing everything right. It's like, are you? Are you really? Are you truly out there sharing your faith? A lot of pastors are. So that one's a bit more negative. But this next one is, back to kind of a positive perspective on this. Some pastors are just gifted with mediation. I know a couple of guys like this. Like, they're really good at coming in to and diffusing a bomb. Like, it's about to go off, 10 seconds, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Watch out. And they are there to lead simply to prevent a church split. I came in after church splits to kind of get things stabilized and get it back in growth mode. Some pastors come in right before it all blows up, and they know it, or they discover it when they get there, and it's like, okay, my job is to diffuse this bomb and to keep this place from absolutely blowing up. So the fact that attendance is stable or just declined slightly is a massive win, because it was about to be decimated, right? And it's tough to see that if you're just looking at numbers. You would never know that if you're just looking at numbers. Like, this church was 300 and now it's 290, 5 years later. You could go, well, that's not a really good story, except for the fact that church, had it not been for that pastor, probably wouldn't even exist. So there's some good stories here. I just want to point out, as we're doing in this episode, just because your church isn't growing doesn't mean you're doing a poor job. There are reasons for that.
Yeah, I want to circle back to the evangelism one, but before I do, this whole idea of coming in and diffusing a bomb, one of the ways that I would think about it is just that there's, I guess, what we say sometimes is just determining what the goal is or how to get a touchdown. Numeric growth is not, I would argue it's not even the primary goal of a pastor. Obviously, that could be the fruit, the old thing like, well, healthy things grow. That's true, but cancer grows. So it's not always a good thing, just numbers being the main thing. Sometimes...
You know what transfer growth is? I'm interrupting you, but you know what transfer growth is?
I do.
It's belly fat.
Oh, in a metaphor, what is it?
Yeah, that's
okay,
if like, man, I'm growing a church. Yeah, you're growing a church just like you are your waistline. Like, all your growth is transfer growth. Like, that's belly fat.
Yeah, that's a way to look at it.
That's probably a really bad analogy, but that was what was in my brain. And when we do radio, we just spit out whatever's in our brain. All right, go ahead. I interrupted.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember where I was. Let's see, motivation. What were we talking about here before we talked about belly fat? Growth. Okay, so it's not the only way to pastor. It's not the only thing to pastor. So if you go into a church and there's just a really bad culture, a lot of fighting and that sort of stuff, and there's about to be a split, and let's say in that first year or something, you make very clear lanes for the committees or for the staff and stuff. You change the bylaws. It's now a healthier church, even if there's not significant numbers of people. And you're laying down a foundation. What we talk about here at the church I'm pastoring now is we call that the foundation and the studs. We needed to rip everything down and get the foundation clear and the studs lined up before we start worrying about the paint and all that sort of stuff. And that's been my focus for the last 15, 16 months. So, but you know what I mean, Sam? Like, you're talking about like preventing a split, and I agree. Like, you prevented it by making it healthier, and that's okay as well.
Yeah. And some pastors just shepherd in communities where people are less receptive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're just in a community that is a harder community. If you're in San Francisco or parts of the Pacific Northwest, not all parts of the Northwest, but parts, in an urban area, a struggling urban area. I actually did a quick consultation with a pastor. I want to be careful here, but a large Rust Belt city, an inner city church in a large Rust Belt city. Let me put it that way. And we did a demographic study, and it's like everything was wrong with this community demographically, right? Like, there's no reason. Like, I hate to say this, but it's a community that we're not sending church planters into. Yeah. It's a tough community, which, by the way, these church planting organizations that say like, we got a 95% success rate. I'm like, that's bad. That's bad because you're not taking enough risk. It means you're going into the easy communities. It means you're doing the easy stuff. Every single one we plant survives. It's like either you're throwing way too much money at this stuff to just make it happen, or you're not taking enough risk and going into really hard areas. Go to the Rust Belt cities. Go in the inner city. Go where the demographics are like not right, even though these are people. These are real people that need Jesus. And we just looked and man, it was like, we just talked about how he could reach his community. This guy, he works for the city. So he's bivocational. He doesn't need the money from his church. This guy was amazing. He's got all these ideas for how he can lead his church and what he's doing. And I was really impressed. And he's got a heart for his community. He grew up in that part of the town. And I'm like, man, we need more pastors like that. But you know what? His church is not going to grow to 1,000 overnight. It's just not. It's a hard area.
Yeah. Yeah. And circling back to the evangelistic thing, I think it's in the broader context of just being outward focused. If you want to just kind of look at it, there's inward focused churches and outward focused, or inward focused and outward positioned. And not all of that has to be like these giant evangelistic events or door knocking. I think all that's great. But some of it's just some basic ideas like I think the pastor should be, greeting people before the service starts. I think the pastor should be shaking hands and saying hi to folks after the service ends. I don't think you're a bad pastor if you don't do that. I do think you're not necessarily outward focused. And, you just got to give that extra 10% to sit there and focus on the outside. Having a really great trained greeting team, using your campus in more ways than just worship services, but also community service. These are all outward focused things. These are events that are not just built around what do we want? What have we done forever? What are the things that we like? I'm amazed at churches that have very small or dwindling ministries, and yet they refuse to change anything about those ministries. And you say, like, hey, the community doesn't want to come to this. And I've even had people say, well, how do you know? Because they're not coming to this. Like if they wanted to, they would come to this. And so we need to shift some of that stuff to be more outward focused. And that's one of the reasons some pastors are pastoring churches that are not in growth, because you haven't shifted it around. Now, as Sam pointed out, that's maybe not the most encouraging thing, but here is the encouragement. You could change that. Like, you're the boss. You're the leader of this thing, so turn the thing around. This next one.
By the way, and some pastors try, and they're just told no. They're in a congregation. Right. Not every church has a congregational system of government. That's kind of our background. But, sometimes a congregation just tells the pastor, we ain't doing it. And if you can't find the volunteers or the passion from the people, it's not going to happen. So there are plenty of pastors like, I would love to change that event. I never wanted to do it in the first place, but I kind of have to, just keep the peace. So my point in all of this is, in any given church, there are reasons why that church may or may not grow. It's demographic. It's, who are you inheriting? But we often forget when we're analyzing a leader, any leader, but we focus on pastors. Like, okay, they've been there 10 years or 5 years or whatever. What did they inherit?
Right.
And how have they progressed? Because if you look at them like where they are now, you could go, whatever, that's not a very successful church. But it's like, well, where were they? What did the church look like when they came on board? And you might go, whoa, that's massive change. That's great progress. So, and just because a church is bigger doesn't necessarily mean that the leader that got there 5 years ago is successful. Because for all we know, they were 2,500 and now they're 1,900, and they're in and you haven't noticed, because you don't really notice 2,500 down to 1,900. But over 5 years, that church has declined. But yet people are still looking at it, going, "Oh, that's successful. That's a big church." It's like, well, the trajectory is wrong. So when we're looking at churches, we always have to ask ourselves the question: what did that pastor inherit, and where have they progressed? In what amount of time?
Yeah. All right. So this last one, we're talking about maybe some things that you inherited, but the idea is that some pastors are able to replace older demographic with newer families or younger. So the idea would be sort of a demographic swap. And so the older folks in the church, and this is sort of like a normal thing when people take churches that are declining or have plateaued for a while. A lot of times that's an older congregation. The members are up in years, and you've got to replace at a high. We've talked about this many, many times. Like there's all kinds of loss. You have people who pass away. You have people that transfer. You have people that get disenchanted and drift away, and you have to replace all of those with new people. And so, just to keep even, there's a real struggle there. So, if you look at somebody and they took a church of 300, and in 5 years they have a church of 300, but the shift in demographics has shifted quite younger. That's a successful thing. That's an okay thing. It's not a sign that there's bad leadership in place.
No, that would be a sign of great leadership. Listen, I got no problem with your age. You can't help your age. If you're 80, you're 80 because you were born when you were born, and guess what? You didn't have a say in it. So who cares what your age is? I'm just pointing out to the reality of the fact that you're 80 years old. You don't have as many years in front of you as, say, I don't know, a 2-year-old. So, people bristle a little bit when I say this, but I'll go ahead and say it. Churches need to be focused on younger people. Why? Because they have, generally speaking, they have more years in front of them. Now, if you're 80, I hope you live another 25 years. I really do. And I hope they're awesome years. I'm not faulting you for that. But if you come to a church and you got 380-year-olds, that would be a really unique church. That doesn't happen too often. Let's just say 380-year-olds. What's your priority? You'd be like, whoa, we will not exist in like 5 years. Like, we have got to get going to reach the next generation. And then let's say 5 years later, you have that church and it's still 300 people, but now it's 150 80-year-olds and like everyone else is really young. It's like you've done well. But if you're just looking at the numbers, going, you haven't done anything there. Still 300 people. Actually, you've done everything there. You've given that church a future and a hope, and you've blended generations in a way that everyone's agreeing with each other and growing together. So, I don't think that just focusing on numerical growth, as you mentioned earlier, is the best way to analyze a church. There are lots and lots of other factors that are at play. And as the title suggests of the episode, some pastors will never experience church growth. That doesn't make them a bad pastor.
I would say the caveat to the switching out demographic situation is, and I guess it's just because I'm sensitive to this, I've seen it so often where a pastor will come in and have an older congregation, and you look up in 2 years or 3 years, and it's all a younger congregation. But that was not done in a healthy way. There was a running off of the older congregation. Now, what we're talking about is like the older members of the congregation.
I'm not talking about a coup.
Yeah.
That's just where you came in and
like
just hijacked
a takeover, like a hostile takeover.
No, I'm not talking about that.
Right. That's unhealthy. So if you're pastoring a church and you're like, yeah, that's what I did. We used to be all old people. Now we're all young people. That's not necessarily healthy.
You just
growing by younger
you hijacked a building
and,
is what you did. if that's your perspective,
that's a way to think about it. Right. So I just want to put that out there because there are people that rightly feel like we hired this young pastor. He shifted everything. He made it. He ran people off. He wouldn't be open and receptive and those kind of. That's not a great look. That's not a good thing to do. So, definitely. I feel like we should tell people about our upcoming episode. Just that they need to stay tuned and make sure that they are subscribed.
Yeah. In a couple episodes, we're going to use some bad. We're going to talk about bad words. Really bad words.
Bad words. We're gonna talk about
like
cussing,
supralapsarianism.
Yeah. Dadgummit. We're going to say some words like that. So anyways, we want to invite you to make sure that you have subscribed so that you don't miss an episode, especially when we unpack the idea of whether or not people are cussing more.
We're going
to
a couple
coming
episodes
up later.
Yeah. But before we start using bad words, let's use some good words about church teams. How about that? How about we talk positively about our good friend Boyd Pelly. his wonderful company that is Church Teams. Hey, you need systems, you need help with all things online giving and website and text to church. Listen, this company does it all. We've been talking about Church Teams now for, I believe I can say, years. They have been a long-time faithful supporter of the show. We want to show them some love. So reach out to Church Teams. Go to go.churchteams.com. Again, go.churchteams.com. I love talking about them. I love that they're a sponsor simply because anytime someone reaches out to us and says, hey, I finally did that thing. I went to go.churchteams.com. I talked to Boyd. I talked to his team. They're great. We get such awesome feedback. So if you're thinking about making a switch with church management software providers, if you're thinking like, man, is there a cheaper alternative? Is there a better way to do this? There is. And Church Teams is the answer. So go.churchteams.com, link in the show notes.
Yep. Thank you so much for listening to Rainer on Leadership. Make sure that you share the show, and we will catch you next time.